बिस्मिल्लाहिर्रहमानिर्रहीम। अस्सलाम वालेकुम, खुशामदीद नाज़रीन। मैं हूँ आपकी मेज़बान नसरीन और एक बार फिर आपके लिए लेके आई हूँ हेल्थ मैटर्स का प्रोग्राम। और आज के हमारे हेल्थ मैटर्स के प्रोग्राम में हमारी टॉपिक ऑफ डिस्कशन है डाउन सिंड्रोम। हमारे साथ स्टूडियो में मौजूद है स्टुअर्ट मिल्स, इंफॉर्मेशन ऑफिसर, जो डाउन सिंड्रोम एसोसिएशन के लिए काम करते हैं, और वो हमें आज स्टूडियो में बताएंगे कि ये डाउन सिंड्रोम क्या है, ये एक बीमारी है या एक जेनेटिक कंडीशन है, और किन मदर्स को चांस होती है डाउन सिंड्रोम बेबी होने के लिए, ये प्रिवेंट हो सकती है या नहीं, और अगर आपका बच्चा डाउन सिंड्रोम आपके बच्चे को डाउन सिंड्रोम है तो वो डाउन सिंड्रोम एसोसिएशन आपकी किस तरह मदद कर सकते हैं। Welcome, Stuart, to the Health Matters program.
Thank you very much. I'm very glad to be here.
And Stuart, you're from the Down Syndrome Association?
That's right. I'm an information officer at the Down Syndrome Association.
A warm welcome to you.
Thank you.
Today, can you tell our viewers a bit about what is Down syndrome?
Of course, Down syndrome is a genetic condition which is caused by the presence of an extra copy of chromosome 21 in either all or some of the cells in the body, and it results in a range of physical characteristics and also a learning disability.
Okay, so it's an extra chromosome in the body?
In every cell in a person's body, in most cases. In some cases, people will just have the extra copy of chromosome 21 in some of the cells in their body.
Okay, and it can happen, this cell, it can be in anybody's body?
The condition can happen to anyone. Anyone can have a baby with Down syndrome, and as far as we're aware, people with Down syndrome are born all over the world to people from every background.
Regardless of religion,
yes,
or background or ethnicity?
Absolutely, yes.
Can you tell me a bit about the history around Down syndrome?
Yes, of course. The first comprehensive description that we have of the condition is from a guy called John Langdon Down, who was a Victorian doctor. He first described the condition in 1866. There were some descriptions of the condition before that date, but they were not as comprehensive. So John Langdon Down's name was given to the condition this century. Previously there were other terms that were used that we wouldn't use any longer, because
so this century is quite new.
It's quite new. I mean, I would say that it became the recognised term probably in the 80s, and then more commonly used into the sort of late 80s and 90s. Mm-hmm. Yes.
Mm-hmm. So what was life like in the past for people with Down syndrome?
I mean, certainly since I've been working for the association, which is nearly 15 years now, there have been a lot of changes. I think the major changes are that people are living a lot longer. If you bear in mind that in the 1940s life expectancy was probably into the early teens on average, whereas now people are living into their 50s and 60s, and a small number of people are living to a greater age, into their 70s and 80s. So that's a big change that we're seeing. I think in the past as well that people weren't receiving the health care that they needed when they needed it, and there was also not as good an understanding of some of the health problems that are more common in the condition. Also in recent history, people were not actually deemed to be educable until 1971, and it wasn't until 1981 that people were given the right to have a mainstream education. So that's sort of quite recent sort of past, and there's sort of major changes that have sort of taken place. I mean, basically people wouldn't have been living very long, they wouldn't have a right to an education. There was very little support there for parents, that it would have been very common for new parents of a baby, say pre-1970, to be told, you can leave your baby in the hospital and we will take care of the baby, and you just go away and have another child. In actual fact, most parents chose to keep their child, but there was really no support there for the families. Not at all. And any literature that was available was very, very negative.
Okay, sure. Can we go back to the start?
Sure.
Okay. So one of the things that we've established that is Down syndrome. It's not a disease.
No.
It's a genetic condition.
It is.
But however, you mentioned that with Downs there is some health-related conditions.
That's right.
So I'm a bit confused there in terms of we're saying it's not a disease, it's not an illness,
sure,
but it's a genetic condition. Can you tell me a bit more about that?
Of course I can. Down syndrome itself is a genetic condition, so it isn't, say, a disease that you could contract. It's just something that spontaneously occurs during conception.
So you can only be born with it?
You can only be born with it. You can't catch it or develop it. So basically you either have it when you're born or you don't. Yeah. Okay. So, but people with the condition do have a greater susceptibility to some health conditions. So there are certain health conditions that are more common. The positive thing about that is that we know that they're more common, and we now have the ability to treat these health conditions, and there is also the willingness to treat those health conditions, because certainly in the recent past people were not always getting the medical intervention that they needed.
Okay. Are there different types of Down syndrome, or is it just one genetic condition?
There are different types. However, I would say that it's always probably best to treat every person with Down syndrome as an individual person, regardless of the type of Down syndrome that they have, and just really to work out, I would almost describe it as a spectrum condition, so there's a wide range of abilities and strengths and weaknesses, and really probably the type of Down syndrome you have doesn't impact significantly on the type of sort of difficulties you may have. So I sort of prefer to think about someone with Down syndrome as an individual, and then trying to sort of work out really where their sort of strengths and weaknesses are.
Okay.
Yeah.
So you also spoke about this chromosome 21?
Yes.
Very technical term.
Yes.
Now, we'll probably have a lot of viewers wondering what exactly this is.
Yeah.
Maybe they're thinking of conceiving, they're thinking of having a child, and they want to know whether they have this. Is there anything they can do to test, or is there anything that they can do to prevent themselves getting the chromosome?
Right, okay. In the vast majority of cases, and we're probably talking about 98% or so, it is not an inherited condition. So it is just something that happens spontaneously at the time of conception, and so there isn't anything that can be done to prevent a baby having the condition.
And what about the actual parent? Is there anything that can prevent the parent having the condition, or no?
There are a small number of parents who may be carriers of a very, very rare inherited form, but I would say that it's so rare that it really needn't be considered by most parents. So really, at the moment, parents, certainly in the UK, are offered screening for their pregnancy, which will hopefully sort of give them information about whether they have a high or low chance of having a child with Down syndrome. And we ask that as part of that process people are given up-to-date and accurate information about the condition, to then think about what they will do if they're told that they have a high chance of having a child with Down syndrome.
And Stuart, is this screening offered to all mothers that are pregnant? Because one of the statistics I came across, which I quite didn't understand, was that you have more of a chance of having a Down syndrome baby if you're an older mother, 35 plus.
Yeah.
However, statistics then also showed that many of the babies born with Down syndrome were to younger mothers. So can you explain a bit about that?
That's right. Right, I know it sounds sort of quite strange. We know that the chance of having a child with Down syndrome increases with maternal age. We don't know exactly why that is the case, but we know it is the case. However, because younger mothers under the age of 35 are statistically having more children, there are actually more babies born with Down syndrome to that population of women.
And in terms of some of the myths that you hear about Down syndrome, and one of it is that if you are an older mother and you conceive later, in life, you are more likely to have a chance of having a child with Down syndrome. So is that not a myth? That's actual fact. But is there any other myths around?
That is certainly a fact. But there are lots of myths that still crop up, such as people with Down syndrome will look the same. Well, actually, if you get a group of people in the room together, you'll very soon realise that they will look much more like their parents and brothers and sisters. The other typical myth is that everyone with Down syndrome is very happy and lovely. And again, no, they're just individual people who have exactly the same range of emotions and feelings as anyone else. So they're the sort of type of myths that are perpetuated, really, that rather than seeing people as individuals, they're actually just one block of people who are identical, which is simply not the case.
And one of the myths is that if somebody does have Down syndrome, there are certain characteristics on, maybe facially, they can be recognised. Is that true or not true?
Right. Certainly the diagnosis of a baby with Down syndrome is made usually very soon after birth because of the way the baby looks. So there is a range of physical characteristics that are more common in this population. However, the number of characteristics and the balance is usually different from person to person. But yes, you're quite right. Broadly speaking, there are certain physical characteristics that are more common, yes.
And for somebody who does have Down syndrome, is there any particular health problems that they are more likely to suffer, or are they just like general public?
Okay, you're right. I mean, there are certainly some health conditions that are more common. So heart problems are more common in this population. So about half of babies born with Down syndrome will have some kind of heart problem. That's the sort of really big sort of health issue.
That's quite a big statistic, isn't it?
It is. However, again, the good thing is that we know this is the case, and screening takes place usually quite soon after the baby is born. And generally the outlook is good for babies with Down syndrome who have a heart condition. And I mean, these can range from something that's relatively minor to more serious problems which require surgery. But very generally, the outlook is good for babies who have a heart condition and Down syndrome. The other health issues that are more common are things like thyroid condition, difficulties with sight and hearing. So there are definitely sort of higher numbers of people in this population who have those difficulties.
And is this all related back to the chromosome, or I'm just trying to get my head around why would you be more likely to suffer from a heart condition if it's not an illness and it's genetic?
We're still trying to sort of, researchers are still looking at chromosome 21 and trying to work out what it is with chromosome 21 that is the extra copy that is causing individual health problems. But we do know that it is because of the extra genetic material that these health problems do occur in people with the syndrome.
You speak about research,
yes.
And we all know that research is very important for any medical condition or genetic condition, yes. In order for us to understand it and maybe then have the appropriate medication, etc., that we're able to develop. What kind of research is currently going on with regards to Down syndrome?
There's research in a huge number of fields. I mean, one of the sort of areas that is being researched very widely is the link between Down syndrome and dementia.
So is this in an older age?
This is in an older age group. People have a greater susceptibility to dementia in this population. However, not everybody develops dementia. However, if it does happen with somebody with Down syndrome, it will probably happen at an earlier age than you would see in the general population. So you might see somebody showing signs of dementia in their 40s and 50s rather than, as in the general population, maybe in the 60s, 70s or
so slightly earlier.
But the interesting fact about this is that people with Down syndrome are all believed to have the physical signs in their brains as they age of dementia. However, not all of them actually go on to develop their condition. So there seems to be something that is protecting some people with Down syndrome against developing dementia, which is obviously of great interest to the wider public. because if it can be sort of understood why this sort of happens, maybe there is the potential for developing some kind of therapeutic intervention.
Is there a cure for Down syndrome?
There isn't, and this is something that we do get asked quite a lot. At the moment, if you're born with Down syndrome, then you have Down syndrome for life. However, the really positive thing is that we now have, as I said, a greater understanding of the sort of health conditions, and we can treat them, and people do get treatment when they need it. We have a greater understanding of some of the difficulties that people with Down syndrome have, and how we can help them to overcome some of those difficulties. So whilst there isn't a cure, we now know far more about how the syndrome affects people and the things that can be done to help them to lead as good a quality of life as they possibly can.
So right at the beginning,
yes,
we spoke about the health issues,
yes,
but one thing that comes to mind is one of the things that you said was a couple of centuries ago people didn't have the access to education, etc., and there was a whole taboo, almost a kind of stigma attached to babies with Down syndrome. Are children that have Down syndrome, do they attend mainstream schools now, or is there any learning disability or learning difficulties, etc.?
I mean, every child with Down syndrome will have a degree of learning disability, so that doesn't mean that they can't learn. It just means that they may take longer to learn new information, and they may need to be helped in certain ways to learn new things. But people do go on learning throughout their lives, and certainly now it's normal for most kids with Down syndrome to go to their local mainstream primary school and their local mainstream nursery. And I think certainly in the UK that has done a lot to change the way people think about Down syndrome, because it's now so normal for there to be a child in maybe your son or daughter's class who has Down syndrome, and you can see that they're really just children like any other children, you know, who might find some things a bit harder, but actually they're like all the same things as other kids, have the same range of interests. And I think it's done a lot to break, as you say, a lot of the taboos around Down syndrome, whereas maybe 30, 40 years ago people weren't very visible. You know, you didn't see people in public, they weren't going to mainstream school, and it was all a lot more frightening, I think. But now it's just very normal, and people are living in their communities and going to the mainstream schools, and I think that has done a lot to reduce worry and fear around the condition, that actually you can see that people are just normal, for want of a better word, you know.
Sure. One of the questions that springs to mind is this mainstream school versus special needs school. You know, we'll probably have some viewers watching out there that are probably wondering, should they put their children in a so-called normal school, so have some level of normality, or on the other hand, like you've said, they may need that extra support, so should they be going into a more specialist school? How is that decided, and is it an individual preference?
I mean, our view would always be that it has to be what's right for the individual child, always. You know, although there are clearly, you know, benefits to mainstream education, and for a lot of children it works incredibly well, that just might not be right for another child. And there are lots of really excellent special schools as well who cater specifically for children with learning disabilities who, you know, will be able to meet an individual child's needs. So it really is very much about what's right for the child and what the parents feel is
and
right.
their level of ability.
Absolutely. I mean, children of all abilities can be supported successfully in mainstream school, and however, for some children it's just not appropriate for them. I mean, we find that generally most people do feel fine in mainstream primary and early years sort of settings. However, although there are people who go all the way through the education system in the mainstream, for some people I think maybe at the sort of secondary level it just becomes harder to sort of keep up, and so the decision is made that a special school setting might be better for that person. But it does really very much depend on the individual child and their parents, and also I think the willingness of the school to include that person properly.
Of course. So what would your advice be to any parents that are watching that maybe have some concerns around whether they think their child should be in mainstream school or whether they're thinking of moving them into a more specialist school? Is there anywhere that they can go for some advice and guidance around that?
I would say certainly give us a call. We have an education officer who specifically deals with the education of children with Down syndrome and the law around educating children with Down syndrome.
So they can just give you a call on the Down Syndrome Association national number, and which we'll have scrolling down at the bottom of our screen. So viewers can write that down and just get in touch and speak to somebody who's a specialist in that area?
Absolutely, yes. I mean, I would always emphasise parents don't need to do this kind of thing alone, that's why we're here. You know, and we were set up by parents in 1970, and it's really always been through parents pushing and wanting to change our society that changes have slowly sort of happened, and I think parents are our real strength. You know, that parents need to talk to us, we need to learn from them, we need to know what kind of problems they're having so that we can then hopefully then try to sort of change things on the ground for parents.
Stuart, you mentioned that you're actually set up as an organisation by parents.
Yes.
So are you a charity or a community group?
We are now a registered charity, but as I said, we were set up by parents, and we have always been parent-led, so we are a membership organisation. It's our members who inform what we do, it's our members who we talk to try and find out what the problems are that they're facing, and really what they would like us to do as an organisation.
Can you tell me a bit more about your organisation in terms of where you're based and what kind of people you have working in the organisation and what kind of support you can offer families or individuals with Down syndrome?
Of course. I mean, in the scheme of things, we're actually a relatively small charity, and it sounds as if we're blowing our own trumpet, but we do actually get an enormous amount of work done. We are primarily an information providing organisation. Our national office is in Teddington in Surrey, and we have offices in Northern Ireland and Wales. Scotland has a separate association. We operate a helpline. Parents, professionals, relatives can call us about any matter relating to living with Down syndrome.
Is this one helpline across the UK?
It's across the UK.
So it's one number?
It's one number. And parents will call us about every conceivable issue related to living with Down syndrome, and we will try to answer their questions. And sometimes it's just a question of listening to people and talking through a situation and maybe suggesting sources of help, giving advice about how to handle a situation, or really just talking a situation through and maybe giving people some ideas as to how they can manage a situation that they're in. So we provide advice via our helpline, we answer written inquiries via email. We also produce a lot of written materials, many of which are available from our website, and we also campaign at a national level for equal access to society for people with Down syndrome.
Thank you, Stuart.
Thank you.
And it's time for a short commercial break. नाज़रीन चलते हैं एक छोटी सी ब्रेक की तरफ और दूसरे प्रोग्राम के दूसरे हाफ में फिर स्टुअर्ट से बात करते हैं डाउन सिंड्रोम के बारे में.